It started as a harmless moment in a London park, or at least that's what everyone thought. A quiet afternoon, children laughing, cameras clicking in the distance. But when a royal guard on routine duty spotted Meghan Markle's young daughter copying Princess Charlotte's mannerisms down to the exact tilt of her head and the way she clasped her hands, something felt off. Not cute, not playful, something unsettling. Why would a child imitate a princess with such eerie precision? And why did the guard step forward so urgently? A simple imitation was about to unravel a far more emotional story. Before we dive deeper, make sure you hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And if you enjoy emotional royal stories with a bit of mystery woven in, feel free to share this video so others can join the conversation.
Ow!
Let's break down what we'll explore today. Hyde Park had a strange way of holding quiet secrets.
Ow!
Even on its busiest afternoons, there was always a pocket of stillness, a corner where time seemed to hesitate, waiting for something to happen. And on this particular day, as sunlight filtered through restless branches and children raced along the grass, a story was already unfolding long before anyone knew to pay attention. Sergeant Thomas Hale had been assigned to low-visibility protection duty, a role most visitors never noticed. No ceremonial uniform today, no tall bearskin hat. Just discreet attire, steady posture, and eyes trained to read the world like a coded message. Years of service had sharpened his instincts into something almost uncanny. He could sense tension in the air the way others sensed weather changes. And on this warm afternoon, some quiet thread began tugging at him. It started with a familiar silhouette. Meghan Markle, relaxed, dressed simply, sunglasses shielding her expression from most people's view, walked slowly, as though savoring the day rather than rushing through it. A few paces ahead, her young daughter explored the grass with a kind of natural curiosity children rarely hide. At first, Hale thought nothing of it. Meghan had every right to a peaceful day at the park with her child. And for a few minutes, that's exactly what it looked like. Just another mother, just another afternoon. But then the girl stopped, not abruptly, not clumsily. She paused with intention. Like someone stepping into their mark on a stage, her small hands came together in front of her. Fingers interlaced neatly with a kind of delicate precision. It wasn't the gesture of a child fidgeting or adjusting a toy. It felt placed, poised, controlled. Sergeant Hale blinked. He had seen that exact stance hundreds of times. Princess Charlotte's way of grounding herself when crowds pressed too close, cameras flashed too quickly, or formal events stretched too long. Charlotte did it unconsciously, a signature posture the world had grown quietly fond of. But this was nearly identical. Hale shifted his weight forward, trying not to draw attention, but instinct nudged him closer. He watched as Meghan's daughter lifted her chins, just slightly tilting it to the precise angle Charlotte adopted when standing next to her mother during official engagements. The little girl even scanned the park with that same wide-eyed composure. The kind a child develops only after years of being photographed from every direction. Except Meghan's daughter hadn't lived that life. She wasn't growing up on palace balconies or in front of a sea of cameras. So how? A quiet unease slipped into Hale's thoughts. He'd learned long ago not to dismiss instinct, not when it came to royal safety. He took 2 steps forward, boots pressing softly into the gravel path body, angling slightly in case he needed to intervene. The girl then performed the movement that sent a chill along his spine. She lifted her hand, palm facing inward, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in the exact same rhythm. The same soft timing Princess Charlotte used whenever she stood still during public appearances. Not rushed, not childish. Graceful, too graceful. Hale's breath tightened. This wasn't mimicry anymore. This was behavioral mirroring, the kind you saw in children who watched someone obsessively, repeatedly, trying to embody them. But Meghan had publicly distanced herself from royal life. Her daughter wasn't growing up near Charlotte, nor did she regularly appear at events where such mannerisms could be studied. Then why did the imitation feel so lived in? Meghan seemed unaware at first, distracted by a message on her phone. It wasn't until the girl turned, clasped her hands again, tilted her chin with that eerie royal poise that Meghan's expression subtly shifted behind her sunglasses. Just for a second. Just enough for a mother to notice something she couldn't immediately explain. But the guard saw it too. He'd seen many strange things while serving the royal family, children frozen by fear, tourists acting unpredictably, impersonators, overzealous fans. But none of that compared to the unsettling familiarity of this moment. He wasn't worried about danger exactly. He was worried about meaning, context, patterns. Because to a trained protector, nothing a royal child does is ever just a coincidence. Hale repositioned himself again, closer now. Close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to avoid making Meghan uncomfortable. He watched the girl step onto a patch of sunlight, the breeze lifting her hair. And then she did something that turned the unease into a knot.
She executed Charlotte's tiny half-curtsy. Not a dramatic bow, not a playful dip. A genuine, unmistakable half-curtsy. The same one Charlotte had performed at church events near Sandringham when greeting elders. Sergeant Hale's heart thudded once hard. Children don't learn curtsies naturally, not these specific ones, and not with the controlled balance Charlotte uses. Chin up, eyes softened, knees bending just enough. Who had taught Meghan's daughter? And why so precisely? Meghan finally called her daughter softly, her voice warm but tinged with something else, a flicker of worry perhaps, or surprise. The girl turned quickly and ran back to her mother, losing her regal composure instantly, becoming just a child again with small, bouncing steps. But the moment had already lodged itself in Hale's mind like a quiet alarm. Something was off, not dangerous, but deeply unusual. He watched Meghan kneel, place a gentle hand on her daughter's cheek, whisper something close to her ear. A mother's reassurance? A correction? A plea not to repeat a gesture she didn't fully understand? The child nodded, but her posture remained stiff for a lingering second, almost as if she were waiting for the imaginary cameras to stop clicking. Sergeant Hale exhaled slowly. It wasn't his job to interfere with parenting, yet his duty required him to pay attention to anything involving royal children, even indirectly. Anything that hinted at influence, identity, emotional pressure, or imitation that crossed into unsettling territory. And today, for the first time, he felt something he hadn't expected. A child who was not a royal was acting like one who'd lived her entire life in the palace. Whatever this meant, innocent or complicated, it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Sergeant Thomas Hale knew better than to rely on coincidence. In his line of work, coincidence was usually the first warning sign. Quiet, harmless, easy to ignore until it wasn't. As he watched Meghan and her daughter walk deeper into Hyde Park, the uneasy feeling at the back of his mind didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened, settling into his chest like an unanswered question. He maintained a discreet distance, not wanting to alarm Meghan. She clearly hadn't come to the park expecting attention from royal protection officers. She looked like any mother wanting a quiet day. Relaxed clothes, practical shoes, no entourage. She walked with certain freedom most royals could never claim. But the strange imitation he'd witnessed, Charlotte's posture, Charlotte's mannerisms, Charlotte's signature curtsy, was not something Hale could simply file away and forget. Not when he'd spent years standing behind Princess Charlotte, watching her grow from a shy toddler into a confident little girl who handled cameras with almost frightening poise. He had memorized her body language not because he wanted to, but because protecting her meant understanding her, anticipating her reactions, and noticing when something was out of place. And this was out of place. He replayed the moment in his mind as he followed. The hands clasped gently, the tilted chin, the half-curtsy. They weren't rough imitations. They weren't clumsy attempts. They were exact. Too exact. There were only a handful of people who knew Charlotte's subtle mannerisms intimately. Her family, her close staff, and a few well-trained guards like Hale who had been entrusted with her safety. How did Meghan's daughter learn them? He wasn't imagining it. His instincts weren't overreacting. Something was connecting these two children, even from worlds apart. As they approached the quieter section of the park, Hale's memories stirred. Old incidents, small but unforgettable, moments that had changed the way he understood royal protection. He remembered the first time he saw Charlotte mimic someone. She was 4 years old, small, determined, clutching her mother's hand at a charity event. A young girl from the crowd had leaned forward, smiling brightly at her. The little girl had curtsied, excited and nervous, trying to show respect. Charlotte, after a brief hesitation, curtsied back perfectly. Everyone thought it was adorable. But Hale noticed something deeper. Children copy the people they admire, trust, or feel connected to. Was that the case here? Did Meghan's daughter admire Charlotte from afar? Had she watched videos endlessly the way other children memorize dances? Maybe, but it still didn't explain the level of precision. Hale walked closer, close enough to intervene if something happened, far enough not to intrude. He watched Meghan lift her daughter into her arms, laughing at something the child whispered. The moment was tender, real. Nothing about it felt staged. And yet, something lingered behind Meghan's smile, something the sunglasses couldn't fully hide. A heaviness, a thought she wasn't voicing. It reminded Hale of the early days following Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties. Those tense moments when protocols changed and the guard had been told to adjust to the new dynamic. There had been confusion, questions, and no shortage of emotional weight behind the scenes. But the children, both sides of the family, were always considered off-limits, protected, untouched by the politics of adults. But now, watching Meghan gently stroke her daughter's hair, Hale sensed a quiet conflict in her posture, as if she knew exactly what her daughter was doing, as if she'd seen it before. A soft breeze passed through the trees. Birds shifted on branches. And then, the child slipped out of Meghan's arms and stood with her hands clasped in front again. This time, she performed the gesture with a calmness that made Hale's breath hitch. Her chin rose slowly, her shoulders squared, her lips pursed in the delicate, polite smile Charlotte often offered during balcony appearances. It wasn't practice or fun. It wasn't an impression. It was habit. Meghan reacted instantly. She knelt in front of her daughter, hands on her small arms, whispering urgently. Hale couldn't hear the words, but he saw the look on Meghan's face, a mix of worry, frustration, and sadness, a mother caught between explanation and fear of being judged. The little girl nodded again, but something in her expression changed. Her eyes grew glossy, confused, as if she was trying to understand why the small gestures she'd adopted so naturally were suddenly wrong. Hale's heart tightened. He was trained to detect threats, yes, but he was also trained to recognize emotional distress in children. And this child, imitating a princess she barely knew, looked lost for a moment. Meghan rose, exhaling shakily, and took her daughter's hand. But as they resumed walking, the girl glanced over her shoulder, straight at Hale. Her gaze was steady, curious, a little sad, and she held it longer than most children would when looking at a stranger. Then she blinked, lowered her chin gently, and clasped her hands once more. Hale took a slow breath, clearing his throat. He needed to act, not aggressively, not intrusively, but responsibly. He wasn't confronting a dangerous situation. He wasn't accusing anyone. But he also wasn't ignoring something that touched the royal children he had sworn to protect. He stepped closer with a calm, non-threatening pace. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said softly, pitching his voice to something warm and respectful. Meghan startled slightly, then relaxed, recognizing the tone instantly. She turned toward him, posture straightening, the kind of reaction one develops after years of dealing with official voices. "Afternoon," she replied cautiously. Hale nodded toward the child. "Beautiful day for a walk." Meghan forced a smile. Yes, it is." Her daughter clung to her hand, peeking shyly, no, politely, from behind Meghan's leg. Hale hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I hope you don't mind me saying your daughter has a very composed way about her." Meghan's shoulders tensed. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Meghan inhaled, slow and shaky. "She watches videos," she said quietly. "Royal events, ceremonies. She copies what she sees." There was more. Hale sensed it immediately. A truth Meghan wasn't sure she wanted to reveal. But before he could ask anything else, the girl stepped forward, gave the small half-curtsy again, soft, precise, perfect, and looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes. Hale's own breath caught, not because of the imitation, but because she whispered something barely audible. A single sentence that tightened every muscle in his body. "I want to be like Princess Charlotte." This wasn't a phase. This wasn't random mimicry. This was emotional longing. And Hale suddenly understood. Whatever was happening here wasn't about imitation. It was about identity. And Meghan knew it. The real question now was, why? For a long moment, Meghan Markle simply stood there, frozen, one hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, the other gripping her own wrist as if trying to steady herself. The park continued as normal around them. Dogs sprinted. Children shrieked with laughter. Cyclists rolled past. But in that small pocket of space where she and Sergeant Thomas Hale faced each other, the world had gone strangely still. Her daughter's words, "I won't be like Princess Charlotte," lingered between them like an echo that refused to drift away. Hale watched Meghan carefully. He wasn't there to interrogate her or judge her, but he couldn't deny the instinct tugging at him, the sense that something deeper was happening beneath the surface. Meghan crouched in front of her daughter, gently brushing a strand of hair from the little girl's face. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice tight, "we talked about this, remember?" The child nodded, but her eyes held on to that same fragile longing, the kind that only made the moment feel heavier. Hale softened his tone. "She admires Charlotte?" Meghan hesitated. "More than admires." She stood again, taking her daughter into her arms where the child rested her head against her shoulder. Meghan exhaled, long, slow, almost shaky. "It's complicated." Complicated was an understatement. Hale could hear every unspoken layer behind the word. Emotional, sensitive, personal, painful. Meghan looked him in the eyes, then really looked, and the guardedness she usually carried in public moments cracked just slightly. "Do you have a minute?" she asked quietly. Hale nodded, stepping to the side as Meghan led her daughter to an empty bench beneath a canopy of trees. They sat down, Meghan keeping her daughter close, one hand absently tracing small circles along the child's back. The girl hummed softly, distracted by the rustling leaves above her, unaware of the unfolding tension around her. Meghan took a slow breath. She doesn't understand the difference between admiring a princess and wanting to be one. Hale nodded but waited, letting her speak at her own pace. "It started small," Meghan continued. Little gestures she saw in videos. Charlotte waving, Charlotte curtsying, Charlotte holding her mother's hand at events. But she picked them up quickly. Too quickly. Her eyes drifted toward the child again. "And at first we thought it was cute." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "But then," she whispered, "she started doing them even when no one was watching." In the house. By herself. In the mirror. Hale felt something tighten in his chest. Children imitate the people they admire, but this sounded deeper, almost like a child longing for a role she felt missing. She doesn't see herself as our daughter. Meghan swallowed hard. She sees herself as someone else. Someone she believes she should be. A soft breeze brushed through the leaves above them, but the moment felt heavy, unmoving. Hale crouched slightly so he could speak gently, without towering over them. Kids look for heroes. Sometimes they choose someone who feels safe, or stable, or loved. A flicker of pain crossed Meghan's face. "You think that's it?" "I've seen it before," Hale replied, not with royal imitation, but with children who latch onto someone they wish they could trade places with, even for a moment. Meghan rubbed her forehead. "That's what scares me. She doesn't just admire Charlotte. She thinks Charlotte's life is perfect." Hale understood that fear more than she realized. Behind palace walls, perfection was often a carefully crafted illusion. He had seen the royal children cry, argue, hide behind their parents when crowds overwhelmed them. But to the outside world, they looked effortlessly composed. "Kids see the fairy tale," Hale said softly, "not the weight behind it." Meghan nodded slowly, pressing her lips together. The child shifted slightly on her lap, and Meghan instinctively wrapped her arms tighter around her. "She asks questions," Meghan whispered. "Why can't we live in a palace? Why can't I wave at crowds? Why don't I get to walk behind guards?" Hale felt something twist inside him. Meghan's next words dropped heavier than anything she'd said before. "And she thinks Charlotte is her sister." Hale blinked. "Her sister?" Meghan looked down at her daughter, her voice dropping to a tremble. "She's convinced Charlotte is the person she's meant to grow up with. She says she dreams about playing with her." talking to her, standing beside her during events. It's like she's built a second life, one that doesn't belong to her. The girl raised her head slightly at the sound of her name, blinking sleepily, unaware of the emotional storm her mother was revealing. Hale exhaled. He had never expected this. Imitation was one thing. Emotional identity displacement, especially at such a young age, was another. "Have you talked to anyone about it?" he asked gently. Meghan shook her head. Who would understand? The world already analyzes every move we make. If anyone heard that my daughter thinks she's meant to be a royal, Princess Charlotte's shadow, they'd twist it into something ugly. Hale understood the fear all too well. Privacy in royal life was a fragile thing, easily broken, rarely repaired. "I don't want to grow up thinking her own life isn't enough," Meghan said, voice thick. "I don't want her to believe she's somehow less than Charlotte, or that her worth depends on being like her." Hale glanced at the little girl, who had returned to playing with her shoelace. Innocent and unaware, children mimic the strongest symbols they see, he said. To her, Charlotte represents everything she finds magical: attention, confidence, being seen. Meghan's eyes glistened. She feels invisible sometimes. Hale froze. That single sentence carried more weight than all the others combined. Meghan continued quietly. "We don't live in Britain anymore. We're not part of the royal world. She doesn't get recognized the way royal children do. And sometimes I think she wonders why." Hale finally sat beside them, not as a guard, but as a human being trying to understand. Kids her age don't care about politics or decisions made years ago. They only see what looks shiny and beautiful. Meghan nodded weakly. "But she needs something more," Hale continued. "She needs to feel seen not for who she thinks she should be, but for who she is." Silence wrapped around them again. Meghan looked at her daughter's tiny hands, still folded in that familiar Charlotte-like way, and exhaled shakily. "She doesn't copy other kids. Just Charlotte, always Charlotte." "And that," Hale said gently, "means this isn't about royalty. It's about connection." Meghan's eyes filled. To who? She barely knows her. "To the idea of her," Hale said. "Children build heroes out of ideas." Meghan looked away, letting that sink in. Then Hale added, "But ideas can become heavy if no one helps carry them." The weight behind his words lingered. Meghan blinked away tears. And for the first time that afternoon, she whispered the truth she'd been afraid to admit. "I think she believes Charlotte is the girl she wishes she could be, because she doesn't fully know who she is yet." Hale looked at the child, small, hopeful, trying to belong somewhere she didn't fully understand. A quiet truth settled between them. This wasn't about imitation. It was about identity, longing, and a child trying to find her place in a world she saw only from the outside. And the emotional reveal was only beginning. The sky above the ruined valley glowed a dull red, as if the world itself held its breath. Smoke drifted in long gray ribbons. The wind carried the faint metallic taste of burnt machinery and the sharp scent of alien blood. Every broken ridge, every shattered stone hummed with the echo of the battle that had raged only moments before. Gio stood at the center of it all, exhausted, bruised, half buried in dust, but still standing. His body shook, not from fear, but from the heavy weight of what had just happened. Around him, the hybrid cubs formed a loose circle, their glowing eyes watching with a mixture of awe and worry. They were trembling too, not from the cold, not from danger, but from the reality of what they had seen him do. He had changed the course of a war. Again, the valley was quiet, except for the faint crackle of ruined predator drones collapsing in on themselves, sparks fading like dying stars. Jiho looked at his scraped hands, still faintly scorched from channeling the stolen power core he had ripped from the enemy's armored juggernaut. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, loud and powerful. Human, defiant. A small voice broke the silence. "Commander, are you alive?" one of the cubs asked, stepping closer. "Commander." Joe almost laughed at the absurdity. He had never asked for that title. He had just been the human who refused to run, the human who wouldn't leave them behind. "I'm alive," he said, steadying his breath. "And we're not done yet." The cub straightened. their fear dissolving into fierce pride. They looked at him like he was something impossible, something legendary, a human who stood against the predator armada, as if it were nothing more than a storm he intended to walk through. Across the battlefield, a low rumble began to rise. Jiho froze. The cubs froze. Then the smoke parted. A towering silhouette stepped forward. The predator warlord, 3 meters tall, armor etched with the skulls of conquered species, eyes burning with a violent violet light. Its breathing apparatus hissed like a serpent tasting blood. The cubs huddled instinctively behind Jiho. Jiho planted his feet. His legs felt like wet clay. His muscles screamed with every breath. He had nothing left, no power cores to break, no tricks, no backup, just himself. The warlord's deep voice rumbled through the ravaged air. "Human, you are not supposed to exist." Jiho wiped the blood from his lip with his thumb. "Yeah," he replied. "Get used to disappointment." The warlord's mandibles flared. A growl rolled across the valley, making the stones vibrate. "You destroyed my legions. You threatened my cubs. You are weak. You underestimate humans." The warlord lifted a massive plasma halberd. Energy pulsed along its length, growing brighter each second. Jiho had seconds to think. He couldn't win a direct fight. He could barely stand. But the cubs were behind him, always behind him. He took one breath, one decision, one chance. He stepped forward. The cubs gasped. The warlord paused, surprised by the audacity. "You know," Jiho said, meeting the alien's burning eyes, "humans don't win because we're strong, or fast, or smart. We win because when someone tries to crush us..." He clenched his fists. "We get up anyway." The warlord lunged, halberd swinging with a roar that cracked the air. Jiho moved. Not fast, just right. He slid under the arc of the blade, grabbed the exposed plasma conduit near the weapon's joint, and wrenched it with everything he had left. Pain tore through his arms. The weapon screeched, sparked, then exploded. The shock wave threw both of them across the valley floor. Jiho tumbled over broken stone, pain detonating through his ribs. The world spun, blurred, then steadied. The warlord rose first. Furious, armor cracked, one shoulder sparking violently. Jiho pushed himself to his feet. One more time. Just one more. The warlord rushed. So did Jiho. The valley trembled as they collided. Jiho ducked under a crushing strike, driving his shoulder into the alien's torso. It was like slamming into a mountain. The warlord grabbed him, lifted him by the throat, and snarled. "You are nothing." Jiho's vision darkened. Then he heard it, the cubs crying out, "Jiho! Commander!" And something inside him burned awake. He drove his knee into the alien's ribs. Once, twice, the warlord tightened its grip, choking off his air. Jiho reached up, grabbed the creature's mask, and ripped. The mask tore free with a shriek of metal. The warlord staggered backward, exposed face twisted in rage and shock. Jiho didn't hesitate. He slammed the mask into the alien's skull with a crack that echoed across the valley. The giant fell and stayed down. Jiho collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, vision flickering but alive. The valley fell silent again. Then a roar rose in the distance. Not predator. Hybrid. Hundreds of voices. The rest of the Cubs clan, emerging from hiding places, from tunnels, from shattered ridges, surrounded him in a massive circle. Their leader stepped forward, eyes glowing like embers. One elder lowered her head. "Human Jiho," she said, "you have done what none of us could. You protected our young at the cost of your life's breath. You faced a warlord without power, without armor, without fear." Jiho tried to stand but swayed. Several Cubs rushed to support him. "You have shown us what it means to be human," the elder continued, "and we will never forget." Another elder placed a clawed hand over her chest. "To us, you are no longer outsider. To us, you are clan." A wave of emotion swept the gathering, a deep, powerful resonance that filled the valley like a heartbeat. Jiho swallowed hard. "Then let's finish this war together," he said, voice raw but steady. "One family." The Cubs lifted their heads, eyes blazing. The elders bowed. A new legend had been born in the ashes of the valley, a story that would echo across worlds. A human who stood against an empire, a human who defended children not of his species, a human who faced extinction and smiled back. Humans were not prey. Humans were not weak. Humans were warriors. Jeho raised his hand toward the rising dawn. Let's go. And the valley roared with the answer of a united army ready to carve their future into the stars.